Um, so yeah, I was, oh, it's quite loud now. So I was just saying, I was really quite frightened about agreeing to do this on the basis that I had no idea whether the Kickstarter thing would be a great success or a complete and utter failure. But I'm delighted to be standing here and saying, actually, I think it was the 8th most funded project on Kickstarter to date. So, sorry, in technology, and about the 38th in Kickstarter's history. So it was a pretty great success. But I wanted to sort of go through that a bit and share some stuff with you. So the first thing, is there anyone here who's actually done anything on Kickstarter, had a project on it? There's one. And is anyone here thinking of doing a Kickstarter project? So there's a few dreamers in the room, which is great, like me. I mean, I guess the starting point is that it's never really been easier to get an idea from a sheet of paper to a reality, and that was really what's sort of driven my career for many years. And so I thought I really wanted to start this by just talking a little bit about how we got to Kickstarter. So, it's all about dreams, and I started off in my career trying to be a sculptor. I wanted to create extraordinary objects and get people, to challenge and intrigue people through form. And I spent an awful lot of time trying to do that. But, life is a bitch, and so I ended up actually not doing any of that, but really just learning how to be a moderately good welder. And so going from a sort of the highfalutin idea of being an artist to being someone stuck underneath a car fixing them for 3 years was a bit of a come down for me. But there's something extraordinary that happens in life, and everyone needs a welder at some point. And I was effectively picked off the street by the guy that was setting up Sky. Had an Aston Martin, and he came in and asked me to fix that car for him. So I welded up the exhaust, and he took me under his wing, and he took me into Sky, and as part of a relatively small management team, we spent 5 years building what is probably one of the world's greatest companies today. And that move gave me great confidence to create companies, have ideas, innovate, and I've never really stopped since. So these are a few of the companies that we've built over the last few years. Each one of those has been a complete labour of love, a complete commitment, and a commitment both in creative terms and in financial terms. But like all these things, life doesn't always go according to plan. So the attrition rate in these businesses has been very high, and it's hard not to feel a complete failure when things do die on their feet. And it's, I guess, a little bit like making sculpture. If it's a great sculpture, it's completely life-affirming experience. If it's a failure, you feel like it's an utter waste of time, energy, and money. But it very rarely is. So you sort of learn from every experience. But really the key thing was that funding each of those businesses has taken me approximately 10 years of my life. That's 10 years of my life that have not been productive in any creative form, but have been spent pitching to VCs, corporates, all sorts of companies. And so I think the real story here is that really not the deals I've done or that it's taken me all this time to raise money, but that there is an emerging crowdfunding appetite to get entrepreneurs off the ground. And that's an extraordinary transition. So we're going from an environment where people have been fixated with cap tables and vesting rights and shareholder agreements to an environment where people are backing dreams and backing hope. And that fundamental change is enabling a global network of people to back people like you guys in this room. And our own experience with that was that if we put ourselves out, we're brave enough to put ourselves out there and try our best, is that if you work really hard at it, the rewards can be quite extraordinary. And those people that are coming into that side are not backing you for equity. They're backing you because they believe in you, and that, they have hope that your project will succeed. And those two things, hope and belief, are really the key tenets of what makes a gifting network like Kickstarter thrive. So having spent 10 years of my life trying to get these businesses off the ground, some of them we exited from quite well, so it's not all a complete waste of time, but you know, the key thing is really looking at what came next. So I wanted to spend some time talking about 31 days earlier this year. So as I said, really the starting point of this was on the 2nd of January, going live with our project. And the 2nd of January is about the worst timing you could ever think of going with. You know, everyone's on holiday. Our device is a consumer electronics device, so you've got CES, this huge looming show a few days later. So we were very, very nervous about it. And our story really begins like this, which was we had spent something like 6 years building a games network for TV. We'd spent a ton of money on building this network. We had spent an inordinate amount of energy building partnerships with pretty much every major consumer electronics company in the world that makes TVs. So Samsung, LG, Panasonic, etc. All the top tier, most of the second tier. We'd built this incredible network that was serving 60 to 70 million TV households with games through that network. But there was a fundamental problem in that we couldn't control the consumer experience because we couldn't control the remote control and we couldn't control the placement of our games on the screen. And most people buy TVs based on screen resolution and not on the memory footprint or the processing power of the device. So we felt we really wanted to, or that we really needed to, create a device that was at the edge of our network. And we wanted to do that for two reasons. One was we could see this shift towards Android happening massively on mobile over the last few years. And our belief was that Android would permeate the TV market in a big way. And we wanted to accelerate that growth, so having a device that was completely open access, that enabled developers to effectively self-publish to TV was a very important part of that. But it was a very nerve-wracking point because we had a bunch of shareholders. We had no board approval to use Kickstarter. So it was really putting ourselves out there and saying, okay, it's a big risk for us. It could go completely tits up and, you know, we'll all get fired and look like idiots. But, you know, as I said, I'm pretty glad to say it didn't go like that. We chose Kickstarter because it's at the moment, until Facebook does something similar, it's a pretty extraordinary network. You know, the stats are, you know, speak for themselves. But, you know, 18,000 projects funded. There are about 5 million people, I think, who have pledged in one way or another through Kickstarter. So as an environment or a platform to raise money, pretty unparalleled at the moment from an angel point of view. The other key point was that from a games perspective, there seemed to be a huge amount of appetite, both in games and in technology, actually. So from you know, 83 million pledged, I think these are 2012 stats, gave us some belief that creativity in the game space was something that the community you know, really went for. 2nd of January, as I said, you know, pretty risky time. What we launched on the 2nd of January was an extremely powerful, completely portable, Android-based gaming console. Priced at $79, it was aimed at completely breaking open the console market. And, you know, behind that, obviously, we have our network delivering all the games things, and that sort of thing. And our idea was really to try and take, over time, you know, if you look at the statistics, you've got about 1.4 billion TVs in the world today, and about 1% of those are used to currently play games. And our view was that Android was a really interesting OS to try and start breaking that up. But effectively, the reason 1%, or only 1% of TVs are used to play games is largely because of the cost of the ecosystem around consoles today. So we figured if we could smash that over time, that would be a pretty interesting battle. We were lucky in that we had GameStop as a very early adopter and a very early backer of the business. So we knew that we had significant distribution behind us in any event. So you know, we entered the market, although we were very nervous about Kickstarter, we entered the market feeling pretty robust about it. The whole idea of GameStick is built around a small mini computer. That mini computer runs Android 4.2. It's packed with memory and pretty good processors. And there's a processor evolution path through it which we'll talk about another time. When you plug that in, you get a UI, and that UI enables you to play a bunch of preloaded games and then download games from the network. And at launch, there should be approximately 100 games. It's a work in progress. So one of the interesting things about Kickstarter is that the community just takes over completely, in that you're sort of sitting there one day just on the 2nd of January doing your emails thinking about how it's going to go. By the 3rd of January, I think we had something like 1,000 emails, some saying this is insane, some saying this is great, almost all of them asking for innovation and iteration of the product. And so the doc, we didn't actually have the doc on day one. Don't forget, Kickstarter campaign's 30 days long, so within, I think, 5 days, we were in China working with some of our systems engineers and our PCB guys to try and invent the doc in real time and deliver that back to the Kickstarter community as the Kickstarter community fed back. And there's almost no organization I've been involved in that's been able to design, iterate, prototype, and sort of launch in those sorts of time windows. So the one thing about Kickstarter that was completely took us by surprise was just the power of the community and what you have to do to respond to that. So we launched on 2nd of Jan, and the thing just took off. And it took off not because we were lucky. It took off because, Oliver, are you in the room? I don't know if Oliver's here, but... Oh, okay. It took off because we had some fantastic people, and one of whom is here. And because they really did their homework on trying to drive the social media and the PR around the project. But it got an unparalleled level of press. I think about 4,000 or 3,500 articles and blogs over the period of time. So I don't know if you can see that graph, but we hit the funding target within, I think, 30 hours. And there was a massive problem for us, because once we'd hit the funding target, we were like, what to do next? What are you supposed to do? And people were saying, give us stretch goals, and we were like, we don't know what stretch goals are. And so there was all this iteration. So I think the advice there is, we were there as quite naive people, but there's a huge amount of intelligence and data around that would enable you to run your campaign infinitely more effective than this if you've got a great product. And what I mean by that, again, you can't really see much on this chart, but essentially what you've got here is a series of peaks at the beginning. These peaks are driven really by the social media campaign and all the work that we did, our databases and things like that, to drive traffic in. It then dies a death, and you're then stuck with do another update, do another stretch goal, and you can begin to see how things work here. So this was the first stretch goal, which I think was colors and a micro SD card being added to the console. We then got pulled from Kickstarter. So we'd been rejected 3 times by Kickstarter at the beginning because we had used some renders in our video. And Kickstarter have changed, because of some other projects that went wrong, they changed all their regulations. So all over Christmas, the whole thing was falling apart, and we didn't know whether we were going to be able to go, and then finally we were able to go. What happened here was really quite alarming, because there was an IP issue with something within our system, and instead of somebody talking to us about it, and instead of someone talking to us about it, they contacted Kickstarter, and so Kickstarter just pulled the whole thing. No email, no nothing. Email 7 hours later, I think it was, saying, oh, you've been pulled. So it's a really difficult dynamic to manage, and they're just managing you as one of 1,000 or whatever. So there's no attention to you as an individual or you as a company within that makeup. We resolved the issue pretty quickly, and we were very lucky that it was it was put back up pretty quickly. This is just driven from things like internal mail-outs and things. So the size of your database is pretty essential. So what we did was we aggregated all of the company's LinkedIn profiles, all of the databases that we'd gathered, and I think we had about 40,000 email addresses. And we used that really to drive the beginning and the end of the campaign. But really what this is saying is that, every day is an opportunity. And I think when we approached Kickstarter, we didn't come in with the view that you had to do much. You launch the product and then you wait. But what this is showing is if we had really planned our campaign meticulously so that we knew exactly what was going to happen every day, with new product updates, new launches and things like that, our opportunity to increase pledges over time, I think, would have been enhanced from this. Again, apologies for the colours on these. The most successful pledge in our case was for product, and that's often not the case with Kickstarter, but when we're selling a very physical product, almost everybody was pledging to get a $79 GameStick console. And that had the impact, actually, of driving, with other things that people were pledging for, driving the overall pledge number up to, I think in our case, about $113. And I think the average is around $71 or something like that. So there's something quite interesting to do on how the pledge tiers work, and how you can get people to pledge for one thing and then pledge for another and pledge for another. And the stretch goals obviously serve to drive that additional pledging. And I guess what we're saying is once you start working out the science of this and looking at the data, there are all sorts of opportunities that we potentially missed that if you guys do a Kickstarter campaign, I'm sure you could get. This one is really just saying that the vast majority of people don't actually watch the whole video. So 60% of people, I think, didn't watch our whole video. So that's either because it's pretty boring and awful, or it's because it's too long, or probably a bit of both. So I think about a minute is the best length, maybe a minute and a half. The thing that's interesting here is that only marginally more than half of the video plays were actually through the Kickstarter network. Most of it's driven from, or a lot of it is driven outside of the network. And again, that comes down to the quality of the social marketing and the campaign behind it and the team that you have. If we take that to the next stage, actually from a funding point of view as well, most of the revenue actually came from outside of Kickstarter as well. So the perception at the moment is that you make a good video, you stick it on Kickstarter, and it goes like Billy O, and you're laughing. Most of the revenue is coming from other sources. And again, you probably won't be able to see any of this, but this is effectively looking at the breakdown, the source of revenue for GameStick from different types of platform and what they represent in terms of pledge amounts and percentage of dollars and dollar amounts pledged. So you can see there's a couple of interesting things there. One is that GameStick's website itself generated about 36K out of that. Google.com did pretty well for us, and then YouTube's down here somewhere, not perhaps as high as one might have thought. The thing for us that constantly surprised us was actually that Kickstarter don't do anything at all. So it's as I was saying earlier, it's a little bit like just putting yourself on eBay. And unless you really work that, it's you're not really going to go anywhere. And so at the end of the campaign, Kickstarter normally start promoting you and offering you first page placement and things like that, so that you can build up the traffic. In our case, that really had nothing, no discernible impact whatsoever. The other thing is that we debated long and hard as a British business whether to do this as a UK-focused entity. And the reality is that Kickstarter is a very US-based phenomenon. And so we registered this product through Kickstarter using our US office, which meant that we could price in dollars, which meant that it was relevant to a US audience who might not otherwise buy a product priced in sterling. And we spent maybe a week debating which route to go. I think this is proof of the pudding that actually focusing your efforts on the US market is the right thing to do going forward. That may change as as Kickstarter start doing much more work towards European markets. Population-wise, obviously European markets are as big, so over time it may change. But right now, I would encourage you to focus on the US. So over that time, we had just under 6,000 people pledged $650,000. We generated about 3,500 articles or thereabouts, and people were choosing one of 15 pledges. 15 pledges is way too many to manage, and one of the other pieces of advice is really just try and keep the pledge table really simple, because when it comes to fulfillment, we're now stuck in a position where some people have ordered a stick, some people have ordered a controller, some people have ordered 3 controllers, 1 stick, 1 case, 2 cables, and so you end up with this logistical problem of how to package and get things right. Again, it's very relevant to a hardware play like this one, less relevant to software, but in terms of the pledge amount, it's quite confusing. The pledge stage is quite confusing to get all of that right. The biggest single thing was just being inundated. So there were 4 of us on the campaign, 11,000 emails during the month, almost impossible to deal with. In addition to those emails, 1,000 comments asking for everything from the sublime to the ridiculous. All of them very well meant. Our community was extraordinary, but they're asking questions that actually sometimes are quite difficult to answer and require multiple chains of conversations through engineering and things like that. So again, very difficult to structure your organization to react in real time to all of those things. And then the key thing was obviously making sure that we kept everybody updated and making sure that we were doing updates that kept people motivated and interested in the project's development. And that I was in China for a couple of times there, negotiating with manufacturers and trying to get some of the production issues put to bed. And so constantly trying to respond to emails, deal with comments, and create project updates puts an inordinate amount of stress on a relatively small number of people that are doing it. Having said that, it's probably the most rewarding experience of my life, because in 30 days, it transitioned something from a dream with some hope and some belief into something that is completely real and that is gaining a complete momentum of its own. And what I mean by that is, within 4 weeks, 500 developers had signed up and engaged with the platform, with more coming on. We had got distributors for key markets. So China, an extraordinary market for something like this, because China, as I'm sure you know, there are no consoles in China. You're not allowed to ship consoles into China, and you're not allowed, and the games for consoles have to go through the government. It's different with Android. So Android games perversely are allowed under that radar. So getting distributors in China and India, and then getting the world's major retailers lined up to stop the thing with a real long-term big wins for us. And without Kickstarter and without the campaign that went behind it, and the social media and the marketing and the buzz and the community and the fact that that community was helping us develop in real time all the products that we were putting together, and without that community being able to choose colors and feel like it was really involved, almost none of that would have happened. And that transition, that fundamental transition in the business, was a 30-day transition, driven largely by hope and belief. But it fits into a much larger plan for our business. And it was hard to communicate what we were doing on Kickstarter, because Kickstarter was focused really on a device. And the device, as I said earlier, was really the edge of network for us. So our network is really an SDK and a games platform that enables you to develop games in pretty much any development environment you want to, and then enables you to publish to different types of devices. Now, the ecosystem at the bottom of the screen there is a pretty closed ecosystem, and so there's some proprietary steps that people have to go through to get onto those devices, and not least being the device manufacturer's QA and things. So GameStick was really a bid to completely break that open by using Android and as I said earlier, enabling developers to just self-publish to TV. But it doesn't really stop there, because everything that we've done in terms of reference designs, in terms of controller design, in terms of PCB design, is being made available to pretty much every device manufacturer that we know. So we have a partnership with ARM and a partnership with a bunch of other silicon guys and ODMs and OEMs and things. So I think what you'll see is a lot of device manufacturers using the architecture we've created for GameStick to launch their own sort of open access games consoles. And I think that would be a really interesting transition over the next few years. So a few little things here. So Kickstarter is really people pitching to people. So if you can engage people, they'll pitch to other people. And when that happens, it's like wildfire. It really is an extraordinary thing. We were advised to ask for a lot more than we needed initially, not by Oliver and people that were working with us, but by people who'd done it before. And we took the view that actually what we needed was 100K to get the tooling made, and so that we could actually start producing the units. So my advice is, just ask for what you need. The time required to get things right, whilst the fundraising is very quick, the time required to get things right and get all the systems in place, I would urge you to create maybe a 60-day window before, where it's not full-time, but where you're just looking at, how do we deal with the logistics, how do we deal with this, how do we do this. So the more you can do before, the easier the campaign will be, and the more successful your campaign, the more money your campaign will actually raise. And I think I've touched on the pledge tiers, keep them really simple, stretch goals, really understand what they are and what your product can do for stretch goals. So the hardest thing with ours was actually, making a stretch goal meant we actually had to physically redesign PCBs and engage quite a lot of engineering effort to do it. And maybe on some of the software projects it's easier, but really work those out before. Two biggest things: hire a fantastic PR and marketing team, because they are really the heart of making it right. And then get a really good video. And getting these videos done is really not as easy as it looks. And I'm putting myself out there a bit, but this is how difficult I found it. We've come a long way with this product. This is what we think this is. I'll do that whole bit again, actually. So in creating transmissibility, all the right, you ready? Okay. So we started off with so the engineering challenge. We developed GameStick. So in creating this model control. So let me start that again. So take two. We weren't. Can you go back? No, don't worry. Okay, should we do it again? Yeah. So, So it was really hard. I mean, trying to get it. Oh, sorry, I don't want that. Trying to get it right is quite a conundrum, and sometimes you might pitch it perfect, and then something changes, or there's noise, or whatever. So working with some pretty good people on that, it doesn't have to look particularly glossy, but you really do need someone who's patient, who tries to help you tell the story. And we tried a couple of times internally. In the end, we used a great team, which I'll give you the contact details for everyone who used in a sec. I talked a little bit about our project being pulled, and I talked a little bit about how hard it was to get the project registered in the first place with Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a very silent organisation, and it's almost impossible to get a response from them. It's quite difficult to know what the rules and regulations are, because they change quite regularly. And they themselves are a startup, so they're going through all sorts of things like that. So I'd really do your homework on on what's permissible at the time. Don't forget tax and shipping and all that sort of stuff. Be prepared to think on your feet. Make sure you've got your systems in place so that you can get that. You're not stuck as we were. And ultimately, as I said, it's really a people-to-people network. It's about getting people to support you, believe in you, trust in your judgment, hope the best for you, and that really comes down through honesty of approach, and ultimately, as I said, really down to some fantastic people. Oliver, who managed the campaign, Contented Brothers, who did the video, Laura, who did the PR, and then social media was by Alethea. Fantastic people. Hope to work with them again, and I wish you all the best with your Kickstarter endeavours. If there's anything that I can do to help, or any of the people there would be delighted to do what we can. Thanks very much.
Packed with information. So thank you very much, Jasper. I'm afraid we don't actually have any time for questions because you did such a great job of covering everything. But I'm sure you'll be mobbed on the way out. So thanks for your time and energy. And we are going to go on with our next panel right away. Thank you.